Kate. Thanks.
All right, so we are both live on YouTube and recording. So yes.
All right, great, thank you. Good evening, everyone. This is a working group session of the City Planning Commission in their capacity as a steering committee for the zoning alignment project, Rochester ZAP. So at this time, I'm going to turn it over to the chairperson.
You're muted, Dave.
There we go. I want to thank Matt for the introduction and all the commissioners for being able to participate. Again, I think it's a vital part of the process because, again, we're the ones that will be making recommendations to City Council regarding this project, and give us a chance after the initial orientation that we got last year and after some of the local neighborhood meetings have been held, just to see what comments may have been shared, other concerns that we may have as commissioners about input into the plan, so that the final product will be, I think, sufficient and appropriate for the needs of the citizens. So what I'll do, I'll open up the meeting by asking commissioners if you have comments or questions. We can get started with those, and then before we end, we'll look at ways that we can identify and kind of catalog what those comments have been received from the public meetings, as well as comments that we may have here. So I'll open it up to the commissioners.
Awesome. Thanks, Dave. Brad Flower, Southwest District Commissioner. As I'm looking at the presentation that was provided by staff during our January 31st City Planning Commission hearing, thank you for the presentation too, and I'm happy to see that it's listed on the ZAP website, so it's available for anybody in the public to go to the ZAP website. I'm just going to say it in case anybody's listening and they want to go there now, rochesterzap.com. And I think this is in the materials space. Also happy to hear that there have been some meetings that have already happened. Sounds like Northeast, Southwest, and Southeast have all occurred in terms of like neighborhood service centers. I had to think of the word for a second. Neighborhood service centers. I would like to hear what types of feedback, not specific commentary, but in terms of flow of how those things are happening and how those meetings have been going. A little bit of a sense for attendance. And again, these aren't like, we don't need concrete details or anything. I'm just kind of curious to know how many people are showing up to these things and whether the format of the big map that was outlined last time, where people are, writing questions or like putting stuff up there, how that's been functioning for city staff so far.
Yeah, thank you, Commissioner. I'll just give a brief update. So yeah, we're sort of in the middle of the first round of public input meetings. As you mentioned, there have been 3 quadrants done so far. That includes the Northeast, the Southwest, and the Southeast. Beginning, or I should say next Tuesday, is the Northwest quadrant meeting. And then on Thursday of next week, there is a citywide meeting for anyone that was unable to make either the one in their respective quadrant, or for downtown residents, or for anyone else that would like to attend. And then the week after that, there will be a virtual meeting. So we're right about in halfway for this first round. In terms of the format, I'll just speak briefly about that. Each format has been the same. Both Kevin Kelly, who's on the call tonight, and Roseanne Khalil, the manager of zoning, have given a presentation in the beginning as a sort of baseline of what's coming at folks and what's on the table, so to speak. So after that presentation is done, there are breakout tables where folks can go and ask more specific questions, either about their property or their neighborhood, or uses or use standards. And I've heard from people that the format is working with some minor tweaks. I think the presentation is helpful for people to know exactly what's happening before they go to a table and start asking questions. I'll let Doreen and Kevin in here a little bit too to offer some feedback about those meetings.
Yeah, thanks, Matt. So yeah, the turnout's been okay. It's kind of, the first couple meetings were a little light, but last night we had a great turnout. I don't know the exact number, but I think it was in the neighborhood of 50 folks came out. Is that, Matt, did you happen to see the sign-in sheet?
Yeah, I did. I don't have it in front of me right now. I would say it was actually probably more than that,
Was it? Okay.
which was good. Yeah, it was very well attended.
Yeah, yeah. So, and some great conversations. And I think, the format of like, just being able to sort of casually talk with folks around the table and around the map, I think has been good. But then the trick is always sort of translating that to submitted comments, because, as we've tried to emphasize, unfortunately, we can't, with all the, dozens and dozens of conversations we'll have with folks, we can't rely on each of the staff members' memory of those conversations to be recorded as input. So, we do have that conversation, then we try and ask folks to put that down either on a comment card or to go back to the website and submit it. So, I think that's working pretty well, and we've gotten hundreds and hundreds of comments submitted, and I think many more are coming. So the sheer volume is pretty intense, and that's great. That just shows that people are involved and they really care about this. It's a lot of work, but I would much rather have this than the opposite, which is kind of apathy or disinterest. So I think that's really positive. But we're in the process now of kind of starting to comb through those comments and figuring out a way to, kind of summarize, distill, kind of look for themes and patterns and that sort of thing. Because, that's what we want to do at a minimum for you as the planning commission is find some way to kind of consolidate and summarize that in a way that is manageable for you to review. So that's something that Doreen is working on now. We've been talking as a group about the methodology of that and how to do that. We want to be as transparent and authentic as possible, but we also, the other goal alongside of that is to make it manageable for you all to review. So Doreen, do you want to add anything to that process?
Sure. So I just want to make a couple of observations about the meeting so far. We do have people that are looking very specifically at various areas of the city and making comment about what they think it should be zoned. But the thing that strikes me, and not surprised, but it's something I want to pass on, is that I'm hearing very different comments from people. So like about the same topic, there's a lot of topics that are pro, two families and and threeplexes in the low density residential. And then there's people who are against even allowing the converted two families staying legal in the LDR. So I'm hearing I want upzoning, I'm hearing I want downzoning. It's kind of interesting that there's no clear direction from the community because there's so many different I wouldn't say competing, just differing comments about the same topic. So that's a balancing act that we've all had to deal with our whole careers, and you know that in your role as a city planning commission. But be aware that there's going to be a lot of work that has to be done to really balance out those interests. But right now I'm just trying to almost just color code the different comments to help me organize them and to see some patterns. And I get very general comments, but then I'm getting lots and lots of these very specific comments about how to define family and how many feet should be between a driveway and a lot line. And there's just a lot of, there's some that people have really drilled down into the weeds about some very specifics around the code. So we have to figure out at what level do we give you guys. So it's just going to be a while for us to get to a point where we have a handle on this. And Kevin's right, there are hundreds of comments because basically we're dealing with comments from before the mapping meetings, and now the comments coming in as part of the mapping meetings. So that's something I want you to know, that the comments are across the board in terms of the topic areas. So.
And if I could add a couple things to that too, when we say that there's hundreds and hundreds of comments, some of those comments are in the form of a single comment could be in the form of pages and pages of notes. And others are just like one-liners and everything in between. The other thing I'll mention too is there was a lot of discussion and a lot of comments, really, as Doreen gave an example about what the zoning designation should be for certain areas, and we're trying our best in the presentation and in the materials to emphasize that, the designation of a corridor or a neighborhood area in general, that decision, was largely made at the, during the Rochester 2034 process in the placemaking plan. That's the vision and guidance for the land use decisions. And what's really meant to be the focus of these discussions is sort of tightening up the edges of those draft boundaries that were drawn to say this could shift a little bit this way or that way. And that's certainly in play, but also just as important is the use table, the draft use table that's been put out. And while 2034 provided some direction on what uses are most appropriate for certain areas, it didn't provide a lot at the use level. So that's something that we definitely want to, continue to converse with the community about and see if we're on the right path. But I just want to emphasize that a lot of discussion is around issues that pertain to the adopted comprehensive plan, which becomes sort of problematic to move backwards on those decisions. So just be aware of that.
Yeah, Kevin brings up a good point. I was going to say that as well. Some of the things are going back, and it's nice that we have a very recent adopted comprehensive plan that I think everyone on this call was involved with. So, referring back to that is definitely helpful, but there still are comments around things that were already addressed there.
Well, and the thing is that we already had these competing interests and these differing opinions as the comprehensive plan process, and we've already tried to reach that balance, and we already tried to put that out there, and council adopted that balance that we created. So, whenever you have compromise, you have people on the ends that are not going to be satisfied with it. So they're reappearing, obviously, to re-debate the issues that we already covered. So we want to be careful not to try to open that debate back up again. It's happening. It's going to happen. The comments are going to reflect that. But in the context of what the hard work we've already done, we don't want to have to negate all that hard work. So and we have driven that message home with people at the meetings. So
I have a question. What quadrant did you go last night?
The southeast.
Southeast.
Southeast. Okay. Just curious.
Yeah, I think that's very important to be able to separate, and when we get the comments for us to take a look at for second or third time, to separate those comments that are dealing with issues around the 2034 and the ZAP. I think we need to be able to separate them out so that we're dealing with very specific things, not rehashing old issues that may be resurfacing because they have an opportunity to speak around those general issues again.
I also have I wouldn't say weird question, but how diverse was that group? And it's a general question. It's just, no, and this is why, because I feel that I don't know if there's a population that may not necessarily attend these events and understand what's happening to the city, and by no choice of their own, sometimes they get left behind in some of their immediate concerns. The people that do understand how we move and the decisions that we make, these are the people making the decision. These are the people that we talking about now. And there is a sector that is silenced, but we should also take into consideration and see how can we try to get to them and get some of their concerns, because the city, I believe, is going to grow. It's going to grow. I have all my hope, and I think this is the chance as people start moving back into the city that we develop a plan that is very inclusive to some of those people that maybe were left behind in the past.
Yeah, and I think this is a dual responsibility. It's not just the city's responsibility to be able to reach certain populations. It also lands in our hands. So what we need to find out is what method do we need to use to make sure that the largest number of citizens, get engaged. And I don't know what the answer to that is. Sometimes as we talk, I always have to struggle with this. And how do you reach my community, for example. And it's hard. I've gone to the radio with somebody from the city and translated, but it's not what it is.
Yeah.
Do we need some prepping information prior to putting something out like this? Do we need to educate people about the significance? How this is going to affect your life, and then, and as I'm saying, that it's not the city's total responsibility. It's a community responsibility to take care of that. So I'm always struggling with that, because over and over and over, there's a large part of the population that gets left out. You can't blame anybody. We all in this together.
Right.
So I'm always thinking, how do we get to the people the other people that normally will not get into the fine details, like, in my neighborhood, just do this and that, and other people have no response,
Yeah. So we struggle with that, in City Hall. As you know, we're always trying to find new ways of reaching out to people. But one of the primary ways we're doing it for the zoning code is, our neighborhood service center office keeps, they have a relationship with many neighborhood presidents across the city. And they also have, an email list that they keep with people. But we really need to rely on those representatives of neighborhoods to drive the information out to their community. And we heard a lot of that from neighborhood presidents that are coming to these meetings. Like, we need to know, because we need to go to our community and hear what their reaction is to this, but we need to be educated so we know what to say to them. Sure. So we've really been relying, like you said, it's not up to city totally. We've been relying on our partners in the community to engage their constituents in their neighborhoods. So, and I know we've reached them, because they're coming to the meetings, and they're also online giving us comments. So it's really be really helpful if they could also get the word out and educate people as well in their community. So that's kind of our strategy now. We do have maps in the service centers. Kevin did a really nice, a very nice narrated PowerPoint on kind of the basics of what we're doing. So there are things we're trying to do, but of course it's really hard to get people interested in zoning. And so it's just, that's our challenge.
Yeah, I get it.
Eugenio, as you were speaking, you said something that kind of sparked a memory of mine about, there's a Simon Sinek video that I've watched a long time ago. And Simon Sinek, for anybody who's not familiar, is somebody who's there's a lot of strong opinions on successful business building and how do you engage community, and how do you create community among and this is a capitalistic swing to it, because he's specifically talking about Apple and how do they do it well. But there's a golden circle that he references, and inside that golden circle is what is the core of it? What makes really successful connections happen? And then you have this loyalty thing, and it's the why. It's talking about the why. And so as we keep talking about this is the Zap, we're doing the Zap, and everyone's I don't know what the Zap is. Why is this important? As a follow-on to this, for Doreen and Kevin, and also Kevin, I apologize. I said Tom gave the presentation last hearing, and it was you, and I'm sorry, Kevin.
Oh, it's okay.
Are there funds available in any sort of through the city in engagement, public engagement? I don't know what exists as a department to get messaging out. But are there funds available to kind of narrow down? I don't know if it's a marketing specialist or whomever it may be, or somebody at the city, to land on something that's really concise as a message. Then we can partner more effectively with the presidents in the neighborhood associations to say, this is the easy way to get people engaged. This is a clear how it impacts you and why it's important. Right. You guys are doing a great job, by the way, and the website's awesome, all those things. And sometimes it takes a marketing mind to be this is the thing that's speaking to the every person.
Yeah, I think there's some ways that we can do that, and we have been doing that. In fact, we've had a couple of meetings with our communications bureau to talk about ways that we can sort of have that sort of concise message like you're talking about, and different ways to get that out there. So there's always room for improvement, and I think we're going to, take on some additional ways and in the months ahead, because it is a priority for us to make sure that we reach different folks that aren't typically represented or are aware of this kind of thing. A couple of things I just want to note about that. One is we definitely, consider the neighborhood associations and groups like that to be partners in terms of getting the word out. But it can't be the only way to do it. To be totally honest with you, it becomes problematic sometimes because there are at least 2 neighborhood associations that I'm aware of that are openly proud to not engage renters in their neighborhood. That's a problem for us because our responsibility is to the entire city of Rochester and not just homeowners. So that's not to say that we don't do it that avenue, but we have to do it, have a multi-pronged approach. The other thing I think is there's sort of like 2 layers to this issue. One is, what are the outreach efforts that we're doing, right? And we're talking about that. 2 is, what is the actual substance of the code and the map that we're working on that relates to the perspectives of folks that are typically not represented? Like, how are we actually designing the map and the regulations to be reflective of some of those issues that they face? And so as much as we want to have more diverse representation and hear those voices, we absolutely want that. I'll give a extreme hypothetical. If we had none of that voice in this process, we would not be starting from scratch, because the collective experience of Dwayne and Matt and myself and Roseanne and the rest of our team, we have a lot of engagement over the years with different types of folks throughout the city. And I won't pretend to speak for everyone and know all the issues, but we're not starting from scratch there. We do have a fair amount of understanding about some real challenges. So, to give you a couple of examples, getting back to this issue of renters and homeowners, there is some correlation between the attendance of these and home ownership that I'm sure you could imagine. And we are very sensitive and very passionate about the needs of folks that are renting in our community, because they're more than 60% of our community. And we need to make sure that their perspective and their needs are met in the actual regulations that we come up with and how we design the map, so that it is an equitable approach and not just approach that is responsive to those that own a home, who are also a very valuable part of our community. Everyone shares that same value. So we want to be responsive to that. And then, more in the weeds of zoning, I'm sure Matt and his colleagues could tell you about numerous experiences they have at the permit counter when a person of color or maybe a person of lower economic means comes to the table and wants to do something either with a house or with a business and that sort of thing. And they run into different barriers in the zoning code that some are legitimate and some are like, yeah, maybe we should change that. This is maybe an unnecessary barrier. So they have this sort of Rolodex of all these experiences with folks like that have informed this process of how can we update our code to make it easier for someone to reoccupy a commercial building in a residential district, for example, or get an auto mechanic business started, helping them find a path to yes and a path to success. So they have a lot of experience along those lines.
We also,
go ahead, Doreen.
I was going to say, we also, in working on the code, we first started, we were having many, many meetings with different stakeholder groups. Like we met with people about urban ag, and because we're adding a lot about urban ag in the new code. It doesn't really speak to urban ag in the code currently, so we knew we had to do that. But we also had a meeting with like housing service providers. We had, if you notice, there's all these new kind of housing categories in the new use table. And those all came from people who are working with people who have different housing needs. And so you'll see like community home. These are all different terms, and they didn't come from us. They came from people who know this work, and they have people that they work with routinely in these sectors of the city. So we've been doing kind of this underground sort of work, not the kind where you're trying to get people to meetings, but really trying to get, and like Kevin said, trying to drill down into specific parts of the code that we're trying to enhance and improve for different people that live in the city or work in the city.
I always say zoning, there's zoning from like, the use perspective and the districts and the stuff that's out now. And then there's the real in the weeds zoning stuff in terms of what those impacts are. And both Doreen and Kevin have kind of touched on that. And as we've gone through putting together what's been put out to the public, which is a reflection of 2034, obviously, we'll be in meetings and all of the folks from zoning will rack their brain, and you don't need much to do it. You can be like, I can come up with an address where something has happened. And, that's a citywide thing. Staffing the zoning board, supporting the other boards, standing at the permit counter. These are all things where I can pretty much come up with stories or come up with examples where if we were, to make this easier, or how should we make this easier, or should we make this easier? And if the answer is yes, it's taking it to the next step. What are the impacts on that? Maybe the answer is none. I don't know. But those are the things that we do. As Kevin had indicated, we talk about this, we come up with the addresses, and I'll oftentimes think about the public feedback that came in if it was a land use board case. What did folks say? What did they have input on? And use that to inform what's being written.
I think what's missing is starting at the beginning. I think the city needs to put a lot of effort in PR before. Like you need to go to basics. It's not starting that we're having this session and this is you got to ask let the people know what does this mean to you. And that is I'm listening to a TV commercial, to a radio spot, and in my case, in English and Spanish, saying why is important? It is important to get involved in this thing. What does it mean to you? How does it affect you? And that's the basic, so that so that the interest starts, and then people begin to I want to hear this, and then you get people attending the sessions and giving input, because otherwise if people don't know how relevant these things are for them, they're not going to attend, and so we keep on missing them, and we should go into and this is not unique to this topic. It should be done for everything that we think we know is important to the citizens. So anyway.
I appreciate that. That was a comment from a meeting in the Southwest too, from someone that had came regarding reaching people and not doing it in a way like using the word zoning that people don't know what that means, but relating it into a way like, how does this affect your property, your neighborhood, right, where you live, right, where you shop, where you access on a daily basis, kind of thing. So I'm taking these notes down as input so we can go back to the table and talk about that moving forward.
Right. I think we're all landing on it. I wrote and underlined 3 times education process. So I think we're all we're all continually landing on it, which is nice.
Yes.
And Honey brought up really good, important topic, which is that it's a collective effort. So with that being said, if you need me or I'm pretty sure any of us to go to a different type of meetings or be involved, because the message, sometimes when you're speaking to a population, depending who gives the message, sometimes they listen, sometimes they don't. Mm-hmm. So I will say that I'm available, because if it is a collective effort, if for any one of you guys, if you want to call me, hey, we're doing this here, you won't mind attending, I will go, because it is an us situation, not a city situation. And you guys have been doing a great job with what you're doing so far. So you guys are going beyond, above and beyond, and that is noted. That's why I'm available anytime.
Yeah, we really appreciate that, Milton. And I think that, just kind of looking at the big picture of how this project proceeds, it's been a bit of an insane press to get to the point of releasing the map and these draft materials and then kicking off these meetings. that had like zero margin to do additional things. But I think now that we're sort of catching our breath a little bit here and wrapping up this first round of community meetings, we're going to continue behind the scenes to be working on additional sections of the code and leading up to a next round of meetings that maybe late spring, early summer, something like that, that are, the point of those would be to continue discussion around the map and the tables, but also to release some additional information. My point being is that during this time leading up to that, we can make a more concerted effort working with communications and working with you and other partners in the community to address more creative ways of getting the word out, but also addressing the sort of basics of education of like why zoning should matter to you, that sort of thing. So we definitely want to look at that, and we appreciate your help around that.
I have a question with the sessions, the information sessions that have happened. Has there been a kind of an assessment of neighborhood groups that aren't showing up? And maybe there's some outreach or some way that we can encourage them. It's not too late. Or maybe we would find out that the neighborhood group is not functioning that well or something like that. And maybe an alternative way of reaching out to engage a community. I just suspect that if you were to look at the neighborhood group map and say, all right, we did these 3 sessions, who wasn't there? There might be some way of finding out, through communications or other brainstorming, how we might engage, folks that that's just using one metric. And I don't know, when people come, are they, signing in and giving their address and all that kind of stuff so that we know who's coming and who's not there. And maybe there's a format issue. Maybe, evenings are bad or lunches are bad, or, who knows, maybe there's a change in venue or a change in format that might provide for better access or different access for groups that we want to reach.
That's a good suggestion. We will do that, and we'll use our NISC, our Neighborhood Service Center partners, to help us with that.
Yeah, there's obviously not a lot of surprises in terms of where we're seeing stronger turnout and weaker turnout, and in for example in the Northeast where we didn't really get a whole lot of folks to come, there's whole sections of the Northeast that really aren't organized in a traditional neighborhood association kind of manner. So we know that we need to look sort of beyond that model for different creative ways to reach those folks. So we definitely want to be mindful of that. And I'll also say, just in general, as much as we always wrestle with this issue in every community engagement process with every project we work on, I do kind of feel like it's amplified by the pandemic. And we're making a virtual meeting available for those that aren't comfortable coming out. And we've got some folks registered for that, and we'll probably continue to do that in the next round. But I just sense that there's an uneasiness in general in the community about coming out to meet and engaging. And even if they were willing to come out and meet, just the toll that the pandemic has taken on our individual lives and the lives of people in different households throughout the city, it kind of limits the margin that's available to be like, yeah, I'm gonna dive into a zoning meeting. And so we totally appreciate that, and that's really challenging. So I think we're facing that as well.
The benefit though is that, sorry, Doreen, the benefit to, I guess if there is a benefit, is that we're in the beginning, right? So we can take this feedback that you're all giving us now. It's not like something's moving forward next month or the month after,
right?
Which is a huge benefit to touch base with you all, for us to take this stuff down and then regroup from there.
And I also I don't want to lose this this idea too, that we did engage thousands of people as part of 2034. And during that process, which we went to many, many, many neighborhood associations. So we reached a lot of people that we're not getting to now, because we did a much broader reach in terms of going to all these neighborhood meetings. And in those meetings, we specifically asked questions like, where do you see your neighborhood center, your commercial center? you know, what we talk to people about, you know, how, you know, what about two families? What about single families? What about renters? What about, you know, owner occupancy? So we kind of asked these questions as part of that process. It wasn't, those meetings did not just focus on very broad issues. We really did talk about land use. So I just don't want to lose sight of that there already has been some of that contact made on a very broad, you know, on a neighborhood, citywide outreach. But that's not to say that we shouldn't do it as part of this process. And we're hearing you say that, and we will absolutely work at some strategies to figure out how to do that. But I just want to remind everyone that we kind of talked about some of this stuff, and it is reflected in the zoning code, those things that we talked about.
Comprehensive plan.
I guess I have just a quick question. Looking at some of the areas of residency as far as housing, I have a question. Is the the pocket neighborhood residential development, is that specifically for an area to develop like small, what they call them, tiny houses, tiny homes, or a conglomeration of tiny homes vis-a-vis the homeowner association type of concept? Or is there a possibility of being able to have tiny homes in other parts of the city where there's a vacant property, somebody wants to come in and build 2 tiny houses on a single lot in a neighborhood? Is that something that's possible based on the current definition?
So I'll take this one if you guys don't mind.
And I can speak to
the pocket neighborhood is specifically designed is specifically in response to the advocates out there who want to support some communal living type situations, like a tiny home community with a center, you know, a center area that's communal, and other kind of co-housing or so that would be more area oriented. But we also have heard that people want a more of a variety of housing options on some of those vacant lots in different parts of the city. So we are looking at how can we do that? How can we allow something like that? You know, different variations of housing styles and housing scale. But, you know, we want to balance the whole neighborhood character issue, but we do want to allow for those alternate housing types, because that's one of the objectives pulled out of the comp plan that we're pulling into the zoning, is creating more housing options in terms of style, you know, affordability, living, you know, types of living. So we're trying to get all of those things built into the zoning code. So I think to answer your question, we're trying to get both of those things. But the pocket neighborhood is really only for that communal living aspect or co-housing.
Good. And I guess my second question is, are there any definitions for what is considered to be a tiny house or a pocket resident? You know, less than 800 square feet, less than 500 square feet. That way it gives people an option to see kind of where their desires or their needs fit.
I know we have a definition for pocket neighborhood, but I'm not sure about if we've gotten to the point yet of determining actual sizes, you know, minimum or maximum size housing. I'm not sure we've done that, Matt.
Yeah, the other thing I was going to say is, I think, as Doreen said, the pocket neighborhood would be defined. And again, I'm speaking from what I think. It may not end up being this way, but the pocket neighborhood will then be made up of some sort of single family, 2-family, multifamily, that kind of thing. In terms of actual size, that may not be defined by a definition. It may be regulated more by like setbacks and lot coverage and things like that. People do come in now and say, can I build a tiny house here? And, you know, you can build a house there. What's tiny to one person is not tiny to another, kind of thing. And then what ends up happening is sort of the bulk requirements, which we have not released yet or done yet, that will be happening in the next, you know, couple of rounds, will sort of dictate a lot of that. But that's definitely something to think about in terms of definition of size or being defined more by the bulk requirements.
Could we get maybe some I'd be interested in just a dialogue among you about tiny homes and kind of get some, maybe a little feel of direction from you on that. We know that there's a contingent of, there's a housing advocacy group that would like to have tiny homes throughout the city. I know other people think it's a great affordability option for home ownership. So I'm just kind of curious, how you guys think that should translate into a zoning code. If you have any experience with it or interest or, ideas.
Yeah, and keeping in mind that there's sort of two different arrangements there. There's the idea of a tiny home that's built on its own lot, and it's the only home in that project, right? That development project. And then there's the other model, which is multiple tiny homes, 2, 3, 4, however many, that are on the same site that are sort of clustered together. That's a little bit of a different model, but in both cases, they're very small homes.
Yeah, for me, I think that that's a critical issue, is that, again, I think that you need to have potentially good options in regular R1 residential neighborhoods that people may want to say, gee, I want to downsize, or I want to stay in the neighborhood, but I want a smaller footprint.
Yeah.
So if I have a standard acreage for a city lot, and if I can develop that into 2 properties with 2 small houses on it, that might be a valuable asset to a neighborhood.
It does offer an interesting, in that particular case study, David, it offers like an interesting solution for aging in place within neighborhoods.
Mm-hmm.
And we know that that's a primary concern in many existing neighborhoods where like the housing stock is beautiful and it's big and it's 100 years old and it's difficult to maintain. And there are all these things with it. Also, I guess like a question then for city staff is, if in that model, we've got a vacant lot that could stand to have 2, 3, 4 tiny structures on them, is it then a zoning thing or process of re-subdivision that would go impacted by zoning code? Would the re-subdivision to carve those up to then sell them as individuals be a zoning limitation?
So I guess I'm thinking of your question in terms of now. Anyone can make an application to do, essentially anything. And if it doesn't meet the code, there's always a process available, which is good.
Yeah.
I guess the question for us as a team that we would need to take back is, do we need to, because currently it would be, you make an application to subdivide the land from 1 parcel into 2 or 3 or whatever the case may be. And then you're making applications to construct, 3 smaller single family dwellings, say, for example. And then we would apply a series of the bulk requirements as well as the design criteria, which which we don't have out yet. It doesn't have to be exactly the same, but there's a set of criteria that has to be met. You have to meet like 4 of 6 design criteria. And that kind of thing. That's currently correct. So I'm translating that into going forward. We would have to have a discussion on, do we want to make allowances for that where you can do that within a neighborhood and don't need to have some sort of special process that can be done as of right.
Yeah. I think that would be the ideal, right? Is like allowing some of these things to occur by right. And it's only because in my experience, and I've been having some conversations, really, really interesting conversations with some community leaders who, about these types of processes. And there's a general sense that there's just enough of a hurdle when things aren't allowed by right. And this is nobody's fault, but there's just enough of a hurdle that people drop the ball. They just stop. They just stop doing it. And it causes real world issues in terms of if take this tiny house case study, it could limit people from creating sustainable housing. There's also a bigger conversation to have about the sad truth that if we're looking at tiny houses as an affordable option for home ownership, that's a bigger statement on home ownership and pricing and equitable housing and things like that. But I think it's good that we're steering towards how do we address these things for people and make it as easy as possible. So yeah, I'm an advocate for right. I'm also not super educated on the con side of tiny house living. I'm an eternal optimist that has loved staying in tiny houses and lived in one when I was overseas. And so I would be open to seeing both sides of it and probably would withhold a strong opinion until like I have a better sense for what cons are.
Does anybody else on the commission have an opinion that's different from that opinion?
Maybe tiny, well, no pun intended. Difference is we also have to make sure that we don't create this incentive to just do it on empty lots in the communities that are already struggling. So then we're gonna have a community that is already struggling and have a random tiny house next. You have to be more taken in consideration as a whole, not as there is an empty lot, go ahead and do a tiny house is going to create a different problem that we probably don't even know how to handle it because this is new. So we have to make sure that as we grow, that we just don't fill the empty lots with tiny houses.
Okay.
Yeah, and that's certainly one of the challenges of designing a citywide zoning code is when we're designing the regulations for medium density residential, that's a citywide district. It's all across the city, and it's in neighborhoods that are stable and even wealthy in some cases, and it's in neighborhoods that are really challenged, but it's the same district. Same goes for medium density, covers the whole market range. So how do you design regulations that kind of work in different markets? And that's definitely challenging. But one thing I would say to Brad's point is that, again, if you sort of simplify it as like there's sort of two scenarios. One is like somebody doing an individual tiny home, and one is a cluster. The multiple tiny homes on a lot, we think that this pocket neighborhood section that we're introducing could really help with a lot of those different scenarios and make that workable. But then in the case of an individual tiny home, in the current code, as Matt said, you have to meet 4 out of 6 design regulations. And as I understand them, a tiny house wouldn't work in most situations because a lot of those 4 out of 6 regulations around sort of character of the existing area around you, and tiny home doesn't really match that character. So we're considering, and we're looking into, can we be more flexible in the way those 6 design requirements are laid out? Maybe there's few of them, maybe you have to meet fewer of them, maybe there are different approaches to those regulations that allow some flexibility for an individual to do a single tiny house. But again, Milton or others, if there are concerns about that and the impacts that those might have, we definitely want to hear about that.
I have go ahead.
Sorry, Tom. Small note on that, Kevin, is carry on. Points systems, I don't know how well they could possibly work in this case, but like, cool, the developer opts for some sort of green technology that buys them points that then offsets design characteristics. I don't know, like if they're trying to like really make something that looks different, great, then what's the trade-off? Use some sort of all electric heating solution so we can use alternative energy sources.
Just a couple thoughts with the cluster or pocket neighborhood version of this. It does feel like, the kind of the judgment between kind of a well-designed outcome or one that maybe is a little less well-designed, starts to potentially, come up. Does it look like it makes sense, or I hate to use the term, but if you're going out of the city and driving in some areas, you'll see trailer parks, and does it have that kind of a feel that starts to maybe bring a negative connotation to what should be a very positive and affordable option. So it feels like it's going to be a tough one to kind of bring that judgment towards to keep the perception, if it's being developed as a supportive option, an affordable option, does it become a bit of a lightning rod for negative perception? And how can the zoning, I know that the zoning can't really do that, but it feels like a little bit of new territory. I'm sure there's some benchmarking that's going on, maybe other communities that have started down this road that have found tiny home clusters to be an appropriate supportive housing option. Does it have to come with a subdivision, or is it the multiple buildings on one lot? I think the affordability of the construction, because as I think about it, there's kind of less inside and a lot of envelopes, or there might be some costs that really steer it more towards a manufactured home solution rather than a custom built, custom kind of designed home. I don't know, a lot of questions. So I think there's a lot of great reasons to make sure that, we're open to doing it, but maybe if there's some benchmarking out there in other zoning codes that have been written that can help kind of, how did it go in this area? How did it go in that area? Has it become, the positive impact that we want it to be, or has it now just become a different kind of, potentially negatively perceived development that is not, not helping, the folks that, where it wants to be an option and not helping everyone else to come together? Is it unintentionally divisive, I guess?
Yeah, I think that's
question.
something we could rely on we'll put that in our consultants lab kind of to tell us what experience they've had in other cities with this topic and code around that kind of thing. So, and just so everyone knows, I'm keeping notes from what we're talking about tonight. So I'll review those notes at the end of the night.
So does the design criteria that are in the works, is that things like setbacks, lot coverage, other things that tend to discourage small lots, or is it other things too? Like you're talking about satisfying 4 of 6 criteria, or?
Yeah, so there's sort of two things. What I was talking about is the bulk requirements, which are like the setbacks, the lot coverage, kind of the placement of the structure on the parcel. The design criteria, and as Kevin indicated earlier, we're trying to write code for a city of this size and fit a city of this size into 3 residential districts. So that's challenge 1, right? The design criteria are there's a set of 6 things. They are things like floor area. There are things like roof style, exterior cladding, and the code doesn't say it has to be exactly the same. It gives a range. So for example, in terms of size, if you're doing new construction, it has to fall within something like, I think it's 80% to 145% of whatever the assessment bureau's square footage is on the house. So if you're building new construction, again, this is now, it doesn't have to be exactly the same. It just has to be within a range of all of the properties within a 200-foot radius. And that's not something that we've addressed in the new code yet. We just aren't there. But this conversation is good because I think it'll help inform that part as we begin to do that.
Yeah, I think you've probably noticed that the theme in all of this is balance, right? And so use this as an example. On one hand, we fully understand the value of context-sensitive design and respecting the character of the existing neighborhood and that sort of thing. We get that as a value, but we also get as a value that we want to diversify our housing choices and styles and opportunities. One, to meet the needs of the community, but also be more equitable in what we're allowing across the city. Those 2 values are held in tension a little bit. So we want to revisit these standards so that we're not completely going to one extreme or the other, but to find a balance of like, let's preserve some degree of character. For example, don't build the house way set back from the sidewalk. That gets away from the true urban feel. However, maybe you loosen up a little bit on the architectural style side of things so that you do have a home that participates in the community by being built right up to the sidewalk, but maybe it's a little bit more of a modern style. And some people might not like that, and some people do, but we're again trying to balance those values that they're not always aligned with each other and find that sweet spot.
Other questions?
Yeah, I think the only last comment I have is when it comes to sustainability. I know that it's big now on this proposal, and the thing about sustainability is that it changes very, very drastic and very quick, like solar panels and so on. So once we have the zoning, I think you have to give opportunity that if things change from a sustainable standpoint, that is, we don't have to go back and then change the code again and change it. And it will be playing catching up with technology as things become more readily available and the sustainable products become even more efficient and in different ways that you could use from an architecture standpoint. So you have to be very broad on how to use some of this sustainable, I'll say, features or equipments. So because then we're going to have to go back if we allowed it in a certain aspect, and then the technology changes, and even if maybe smaller, maybe you can use it in a different way, then we'll have to go back and change the code. So we have to be thought out very, very, very quick, very, very high level standards. So I know you guys doing a great job, but just a thought.
Yeah, that's a good point. And our consultant has been helping us with that, because they are kind of on the cutting edge of that writing code that can anticipate what's happening in the realm of sustainability. And we also have inside City Hall, we have some really strong expertise in that regard. So we're also relying on them to help us get that right. But I appreciate that comment.
I've got a question on tiny houses as relates to people wanting either in-law apartments or whatever on their property as part of age in place in a way. If you have your kids take over the main house and you move to a smaller house on this, is that something that has been of interest to the public? Has that been brought up at all?
It's come up a couple times. Yeah, for sure.
It's not-
For sure.
I don't know, I'm just.
Oh, it's come up a lot. That's what he means.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
So in like a lot of issues that we're seeing here, there's folks that really want to see more opportunities for that, and then there's folks that have some pretty significant concerns. So again, balance. How do we balance that? But one point of clarification, and maybe Matt or Doreen could explain this better, but there's so many different iterations of what people consider to be an accessory dwelling unit or an ADU or an in-law apartment or granny flat. Those sort of the terms that are out there. There's different iterations of that. The one iteration that is common is that it's a small kind of apartment in the back of the house. It's attached to the house. It has a separate entrance, and you're renting it out, or you're letting your in-law stay there or whatever. Obviously, zoning can't control who is allowed to stay there. So that could very well be your in-law, and then 10 years down the road, it could be just a renter, right? So we can't control that, but we have to acknowledge that. But in that scenario where it's attached, we actually consider that a two-family home. So people will go looking for ADU in the use table, and it's not actually there. That iteration of it is basically a double. And Doreen or Matt, do you want to expand on that and the other iterations and how that plays out in the use table?
Yeah, I can talk a little bit more about it. So Kevin summed it up perfectly. People have lots of different definitions of what an accessory dwelling unit or auxiliary dwelling unit or in-law apartment or what have you. One thing to remember with the city, which I'm saying in contrast with the suburban region, is we have a built-out city that has a lot of nonconformities. So even in our lowest density district, there are many structures which have additional units which people can use as an accessory dwelling unit, if that's what they want to call it. The actual word is not in the code, as Kevin had indicated. In the medium and high density residential districts, you of course can have multiple units if you choose to use one to rent out to an in-law or something that you can certainly do that. Currently, we have had people come in for a situation like you're describing, an aging in place situation, and people have put additions on. There's not an additional kitchen. The kitchen is sort of the linchpin in terms of making it an actual dwelling unit. But a bedroom, a bathroom, maybe a separate entrance off the back, but it flows in with the existing dwelling unit is something that someone could do. But as Kevin indicated, that actual phrase or one of those phrases is not within the code. But it's not to say that people don't use a unit on their property for something like that. So hopefully that helps answer a little. Doreen, I don't know if you want to add some more.
Well, it has come up a lot in the meetings. And one of the questions is, well, could I build a detached, not an attached? Because attached is going to be a two-family. That's basically what it's called, a two-family. Okay. If it has a separate entrance and a separate kitchen and it's separate from the main, it's two units.
But if it doesn't have that separate entrance, Doreen, that's we consider that just a single family home, right?
Yeah, that has maybe like a, what do they call it, Matt, a summer kitchen or?
Yeah.
What
I know
is
what
it
you're talking
called?
about. I can't think of it, but I know what you're talking about.
So
But if it's
anyway,
attached and doesn't have a separate entrance, we
Right,
don't
right.
consider that a two family or an accessory dwelling unit.
No, that's right. And so if someone wants to do a detached structure, we have situations in the city, and it's happened throughout my career in zoning, where someone wants to, turn the garage into a dwelling unit, or they want to build another house because they got space on the yard. But they don't want to subdivide it. They just want to have this other,
Right.
and basically it's a single family dwelling is allowed in the low density residential. So the only thing you're probably not going to meet are the yard and space
The
requirements.
setbacks, yeah.
And the setbacks, so you're probably going to need an area variance, but an area variance is not as difficult to get as like a use variance. So it's something that you can do now. You just have to meet you'd probably have to get an area variance. So it's not like it's prohibited. So I don't know how you feel about those, if you want to give us some direction and what you guys might agree on is something, but curious to hear what some of your direction might be on that.
So where things stand now, like one could abide by this single family, like R1 requirements as a matter of right, and put a second one family dwelling on a property as long as it satisfied the total lot coverage and setbacks and everything?
Correct. If you're in an R1 low density residential district and you want to build a second single family, it's a permitted use in the district. There's nothing prohibiting someone from putting a second single family, but you have to meet the lot size and the setbacks and that sort of thing. So as Doreen indicated, there's currently a path for that, which would remain, which are the area variances.
Interesting.
Mm-hmm.
And we have seen that before.
Yeah.
And there's also situations where they're built as structures in the back that were built as second structures. There are neighborhoods where there just were multiple structures placed on the parcel, and that's just the way it was originally designed.
Yep.
So you wouldn't be required like to subdivide to do that? Like,
No, not in the situation not in the situation we're describing that might need variances. No, it would remain as one parcel.
But it's important to recognize, though, that in casual conversation, whether it be, at these community meetings or someone coming to the permit counter, in the scenario that was just described of a detached garage being converted, conversationally, people would say, I want to do an ADU. I want to do an accessory dwelling unit in my garage. And so we understand what they're talking about, but we have to sort of redirect the conversation to say, I know what you're saying, but technically what the code says is we consider that to be a single family home. Whereas if it's attached, we also don't call that an ADU. Technically in the code, we say that's a double or a two family.
Right. And we've spent countless hours talking about this too, about how do you allow it would be a two family, but could we call it an accessory dwelling unit and allow it in the LDR as of right? And we think, well, if they, if it's rented, if it's being used by a member of the family, like a student or an in-law or, whatever. And it's like, well, you can't really monitor that. I mean, that's not something you could really control. And we don't want to set us up for failure in terms of enforcement. So that's a really hard thing to do. I mean, we would love to do that. I think we would love to do it. Ideally, we would love to do that. But then what do we, if someone calls us up and they're like, my neighbor has a two family and they're not allowed to do that. And it's not their mother-in-law living there. And we're going to go, okay, well, we got to go there and ask for birth certificates. I mean, DNA tests. I mean, what are we going to do here? How do we do this? So we really have tried to think about a way to do this so that people would feel more comfortable with allowing two families as of right in the LDR. And it's been really hard for us to figure that out.
Any other, major comments or concerns before I know it's getting close to half past, so don't want to hold up people's time. Any other comments or concerns that we want to share with the team? Go ahead.
I just want to thank everybody for like providing a space for us to actually ask these questions, and also with what's showing up for me, at least what I'm reading, is like really honest humility in like receiving guidance from us, because I know that you're like deep in this every day. And so to engage city commissions and citizens throughout, and like, I think we all believe that you have everybody's best intentions at heart, and like are doing work with like real purpose. And like, that's amazing. And it's really appreciated. And still thank you for like giving us space to kind of talk about it. And just to read, I written a note, and I just wanted to kind of like give a thumbs up and a kudos to the idea of like all of the commentary that you're getting in whatever format that can be rolled up in terms of how we as a commission can use it. And if that's like a thematics with a tally, we had 50 comments that were in this and 20 that were in this, without, and again, somebody has to do the work to kind of go through all of that. I know that's what you're doing currently. And I think that's a format that would certainly work for me. And I don't know if it would work for other commissioners, but that rolled format, I think, does keep things efficient on our side.
I'd like to echo Brad's comments about the sincerity and the effort that the team not only puts out, but it shows that it's all, you are into it, and it's really, really appreciated, probably more than you think.
Thank you both for that. That's appreciated on our behalf too, and the rest of the team.
Very much appreciated.
To help the commission like evaluate how much time they have or when they should get any comments that they have into you. Like, is it like we should get it to you as soon as possible, or as long as you get it to you by a certain date, it'll be fully considered along with the others, or something in between? Just kind of a time frame of if they want to submit comments, when they better make sure they get them in by.
Oh, I would like them to see the public comments first, before they make their comments. I think the public would appreciate the commission seeing more public comments before you formulate your comments. So I wouldn't put a deadline on it yet. Let's just for now see how things are going. We haven't given people a deadline for commenting on the stuff that's out now, because everything's building on each other. And so I think we should just, I don't know how my colleagues feel, but I feel like we should leave that open for a little while.
I agree. And considering even this first round, there's still several meetings left. I think just getting, and I think people will leave the meetings that we're having now and report back to their neighbors or report back to whatever community organization they're a part of, and then people will research it and send things in. So I guess I'm agreeing with what you said, Doreen.
Okay.
Yeah, I think that makes sense. And that being said, we if you have any thoughts or things that you notice now or in the coming weeks that you want to just send that our way, we certainly could welcome that. It doesn't have to all come at the end, but definitely would encourage you to kind of look at it from your own perspectives and as a group's perspective, but then also look at it through the lens of understanding the community feedback. But would welcome anything in the interim if you have thoughts. And I guess the best way is to, like everyone else, just go through the website and the comment form on there, just so it's all sort of corralled into the same place and processed.
So one comment I want to make too about the public comment.
Don't look so stressed, Doreen.
It's stressful. Sorry. Okay. So one of the things that I'm getting a lot of written comments about is I want duplexes and triplexes and multifamilies allowed as of right in LDR, in the low density residential. So you're going to get that comment, right? You're going to get a comment that says, we received, a lot of comments about this. Well, we didn't receive very many comments on the other side. And the reason we didn't receive any comments on their side is because we're not proposing that right now, right? We're not proposing to see that in the LDR. The use table shows it is not allowed. It's prohibited. So I just want to kind of make you aware that if we were proposing to put, we could go back and forth on this. We could say, oh, okay, well, we heard all these people say we want 2s and 3s allowed as of right in the LDR. So you guys say, well, we're hearing a lot about this, so we need to put those in the LDR. Well, then we put it out for review again, and then suddenly we got hundreds of comments to say, no, we don't want those in the LDR. We could go back and forth on this issue. So just remember that when we give the comments, that people are commenting on what's being proposed now, and if it's not being proposed, they're not going to comment on it. Okay.
This kind of goes back to what was being proposed in 2034, right? Like relying on what was in 2034 is what people are going by in terms of what they're commenting on. So if the comment comes in and it's something that was addressed in 2034, obviously the other side of that is not commenting because
right,
it was not in 2034.
Exactly. So when you guys gave me that feedback in the beginning of the meeting, like pull out those things that have already been done as part of 2034, that might be one of those things that comes out. Because that was already kind of decided, because we had that balancing act we already had as part of that process about what do we do with LDR in terms of multiples. Okay, well, this is what we heard both sides, and this is what we decided to go with, because that's what we decided, okay, based on our market and so forth.
Doreen, I think I hear you like loud and clear. And for me, it's to quote a friend, the comments aren't necessarily quantitatively valid, right? Like, because it's the lens through which we look at them. But I think it's helpful of taking the 100 to be like, oh, this topic seems to be something that's getting a lot of attention,
right?
As a topic, not as a like, oh, we got to make a reaction to this.
And we got 6 comments here and then 12 comments on the same, other side. And it just doesn't work like that. So I will try to be mindful of that when I summarize the comments for you.
Yeah. And we want to be very careful, both with you as a committee, but as the public in general, to not do this in a way that implies that this is about counting numbers and that this is a referendum, because that's not what it is. And also to just clarify too, when Doreen said pulling out comments like that doesn't mean that we're pulling out and discarding and not showing.
Right.
It's more of they're going to be sort of in this sort of category. So you understand that like these decisions were, kind of made at the 2034 stage, but we want you to be aware that this is really, really important to folks. And so here's kind of what's being said. But then this other category of like, these are the decisions that are in play right now. And this is what we're hearing.
And I think that's crucial to the work that we do as a commission also, is that we may have cases where we'll have 15, 20 people in favor of it and 2 people against, and we vote in favor of the people who were against it because it fits a broader picture.
Makes sense.
And yes, so we take all those and we take everybody's comments into consideration, look at the law, look at the codes, and make a decision that's best for the community.
So I think I was thinking of that a lot. Like, you're not vote counters as members of this commission. You have certain criteria that, you got to look at whether they're being addressed, regardless of how many people are weighing in on that or irrelevant criteria. And I think I'm getting the sense that the ZAP team is facing the same thing. Like, how do you address things that objecting to things that have already been decided in the 2034 plan, trying to relitigate that.
Exactly. So these are if you guys don't mind, I'll just take a minute to go through the notes I took.
Okay.
So that you can tell me if I've got things right. And so I won't be able to see your faces while I'm reading this. So in case you give me signs, I won't see them. Okay. So with respect to public comments, you would like to see a summary of the comments received. So I can do that and sort of maybe also put them in the context of what was already decided in 2034. With respect to public outreach, you want more PR around zoning and the ZAP. to get people more interested. You know, what does zoning mean to you? If we want someone from the CPC to deliver a message to a community group, you've made yourselves available for that. You think we need to make an inventory of the neighborhood associations that haven't been represented at our meetings and see if we can strategize how to get them more involved. Under housing options, are we allowing tiny homes on vacant lots? And you're saying we need options in the LDR neighborhoods. A tiny home is a great option for people who want to downsize and stay in the neighborhood. It's a good aging in place option. If we have a vacant lot, can several tiny homes be built on that vacant lot, or just one? These should be allowed there should be some allowability as a right. They're a valuable, sustainable option. Make sure we don't create an incentive, however, to build nothing but tiny homes within a struggling neighborhood. What is the threshold for when a group of tiny homes creates a negative appeal? And get some benchmarking from our consultant on tiny home allowances in other cities. Design, we should maybe think about getting design points for sustainability that could be used as using sustainability points as a trade-off for certain design requirements. Consider that option. We should be considering manufactured homes as well as the tiny homes. And under sustainability, we should be anticipating sustainable products / features so we don't have to continuously revisit the code as these options evolve. Anything I missed or anything else you can think of that you want to include in that conversation?
So, but a good summary. Thank you.
Very
Okay.
good.
Well, that definitely was a
Steve?
good summary. I think hearing Tom call you guys the ZAP team, it seems like you should at least have T-shirts or some kind of
Part of the PR,
Avengers
right?
style garb.
I've
The
got some-
Charger style, like lightning rod on your shirt. Superheroes.
I've got some band merch hookups. So
Okay, all right.
Sometimes I feel like I want like a hard hat at certain meetings. So could we do Zap hard hats?
All right. Well, thank you everyone so much for this. And thank you, Doreen, for taking such good notes. Just as a reminder to the community, there are still upcoming meetings. The dates and times and locations can be found at rochesterzap.com. You can also submit comments on there, review the use table, the definitions, the use standards, and all sorts of other good information regarding the ZAP update. So if there's nothing else, I would say that concludes this meeting. And again, thank you, everyone.
Thank
We
you,
really
Matt.
appreciate the feedback.
Thank you.
Thank you, commissioners, and we'll see you at the next meeting. Thank you, Doreen, Kevin, Matt, and Kate.